So what's your overall marketing mix to bring in customers? I mean, you alluded to it earlier with like local SEO. You said a little bit about Meta, but overall, what's like the general gist of what you got going on?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of Meta, Google Ads, your kind of table stakes when it comes to D2C, e-com approach, your performance marketing, of course, SEO, content in a lot of ways, and then email. I mean, email and SMS is just kind of bread and butter in cannabis because it lets you get around a lot of the restrictions that you have, right? Advertising elsewhere. We've been doing a lot of events, and our COO, Kiro, is fantastic at events. So events has been going well, but even events, right, needs tweaking. Some events have been phenomenal. Other events have been lackluster, but events is very local. So we're still trying to understand the cadence of events that's appropriate for our community and what is it about our events that does drive them out and create engagement. I would say that those are probably our primary channels where we have most of our customer acquisition. And we're going to be trying different things, right? Like we're going to try direct mail and flyering. We're going to try like sponsoring community events. Some of those things that are a little bit less measurable. I mean, you can do things in direct mail, for example, to make it measurable. Maybe put a QR code on your postcard, incentivize people with a specific offer to kind of track, right, how people came in. But that's still things that we're thinking about trying. And I definitely welcome any ideas if you have it on that end as well, because there has to be a mix of online and offline in order to be a successful store.
Yeah. If you go too hard on either or the other one, you're not diversified in terms of the marketing channels themselves, right? On the offline side, I mean, the people that I've spoken to in general, I've asked them the same question, right? Like the problem is with like these now branding events, these offline events is the attribution, right? It's like, how do you know that this event led to this, right? And yes, you can have a QR code. You can say, hey, come to the store and shout or something like that, right? And have somebody at the cashier just marking down how many people shouted, when they came in, and then you can have some sort of metric to see how that works. But in most, if not all of the cases, because I do personally ask that question myself, because coming from, again, the marketing agency background, the data analytics and stuff like that, it's all about attribution. How do you track what you've done so that you can provide measurable results to the input that you have so you have a desired output, right? And most of the time they tell me like, look, like at the end of the day, it is very much just like a branding play. Attribution is very hard, but they find like just the consistency of them doing it, they think it helps, right? Nobody has come to me saying like, yes, I sponsored this event and it definitively did this, right? But most of the times I see them pairing it with something for the community anyways. So, if it's a charity sponsorship event, right, it's just for the good of the business and the community either way, like regardless if there's an ROI in it at the end of the day. So like they do stuff like that, sponsoring music events and doing these sorts of things, and more so contributing to the because there's still this stigma around cannabis itself, right? So just saying that like, hey, we're in this community, right? And for the people who are still weary about this drug or whatever it is still something that is benefiting the community locally, right? So if you are sponsoring local events and doing all these things, like it ends up being a good thing. Now, I think if you want more direct attribution, business partnerships, and this is where you can put your B2B hat back on, is probably a little bit easier in terms of attribution. So finding the number one hairdresser, in the neighborhood locally, right? Finding the number one florist, right? Finding like whatever those businesses are. And then you can say, hey, we're such a local community. We now have partnerships with, value stacking, right? So, hey, you work with our agency and you get 15% discount off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 different companies, right? So you can essentially do the same thing as like, hey, if you come across, Sarah's florist company, right? Get a 15% off anything that you buy for Valentine's Day. So now you have direct attributable things that you can track on both sides of the equation, right? So then on the flip side, on 420, then they can do a 420 deal on their side and then, help you out with that, right? So different things like that make it a little bit more attributable. But when we're talking about events and communities and like larger scale things where you're just sponsoring stuff, it's a little bit trickier. Maybe on a day-to-day basis, like, hey, I sponsored this event, so we're seeing more traffic over these next 3 days, and have like the whole 7-day, 3-day window type thing. But overall, it is very much a brand play. But what I would say is like consistency reigns over everything. It's like, you know, when you look at those commercials with a car, right? I don't know, the Kia driving underneath the bridge going really fast, and the family in the SUV, and the Ford, you know, driving off-road and all that stuff. Nobody looks at those ads and says, yes, I'm going to buy a Ford F-150 right now. They're like, you know, I'm looking to buy a truck. Okay, you know, I'm going to check these guys out and see what they're all about, right? But you don't really get that unless you have the consistency within the community. So in most cases, it's not necessarily a home run. It's just like, is this something I can add to the budget that I can consistently do over the next year or so, and not really worry about any return until I am worrying about a return, kind of thing. And that would be the general thought process about that, those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, I think that those are great points. I mean, attribution could be, you know, as marketers, I'm doing my best right now to not let attribution be kind of like a cage in a way for my thinking.
Yes.
Because that's been like all I'm about for a long time, right? If it's not attributable, I'm not doing it. If I can't drive attribution, but
direct response.
Right, no, exactly. But honestly, what ANJA has taught me is, in a lot of ways, how important brand is.
Yes.
And how growing a brand isn't necessarily always measurable from the way that we think about attribution, especially being able to attribute revenue and ROAS, right? It's like, you can't only be driven by those things, especially when you start looking. Now, look, if you got hired to be a growth marketer and be a performance marketer, then yes, of course. But when you're leading a larger brand, a larger organization, you have to think about more than just your direct attribution. And I would say that that's something that I've learned along the way. And I think myself and our CMO, because he's also a growth marketer, has learned along the way. And I can see it. And when he presents things and talks about things now, how much brand is starting to take shape and really dominate our conversations in a lot of ways. And it's a good thing. So yeah, you know, we're thinking about a lot of those things. The local business partnership is a great suggestion. I wish there was a way to really definitively quantify, right, impact of brand brand marketing in a lot of ways. But I think you see it in the reception, right? How people feel walking in again. And just like every time somebody walks into the store, it's like, hey, I brought my friend. That's brand to me, right? Yes. So that means a lot.
Yeah. You know, I mean, we're getting super tactical in this podcast. I don't know how many, how many people are actually going to look into it, but I think this is super interesting because it's right up my alley. One thing that I would say is you have enough data points to now 7 months in where you should have a demographic of your highest paying customers, your customers that are most frequent coming in, that sort of stuff, right? It could be male between the ages of 18 to 24. It could be female from the ages of 30 to 30, like whatever it is, right? So you will have some sort of metric on who the top ideal customers are for your business, right? The problem now with event things is like, okay, I want to sponsor an event or I want to run an event. What do I do? Like, what is the thing that I sponsor, right? And the easiest way is to do things that associate with cannabis itself, concerts, music events, that sort of thing, right? But if you want to get more granular, it's just like, look at your core demographic, look at, you know, what people are purchasing and what age, right? And if you can replicate your top 20% customer base, you know, the whole 80-20 stuff, right? Like, how would you go about doing it, right? So then you kind of look at your data, see how much they purchase, and then essentially that's where your community money should be spent. And then you need to figure out what resonates with them. So it's not just, hey, how can I put ANJA where they are? It's how can I associate ANJA with the things that they like and also where they are? Because that's also another thing, right? It's like, you know, just having a logo up on a little banner flyer doesn't do anything. But you need to now associate, you know, I'm just, you know, talking off the top of my head, but let's say, well, you can't even do it really to these Gen Z people, but let's just say Fortnite is the thing, right? It's just a really easy example. So you would go out and you would find some sort of event, but then associate ANJA with Fortnite. And then now you become the cool thing within that core demographic of people, right? So finding those events that also align with what that demographic finds cool is equally as important as sponsoring the events themselves. Because if you now go sponsor events that are now, you know, females from the ages of 60 to 70, you know, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to purchase from you anyway. So you might as well be marketing to people out of state, right? So figuring out your core demographic, then almost surveying them And, you know, I don't know if you can like kind of ask them questions, but I don't know if you're in the store personally, but you have people inside of the store that know people by name. Hey, Jack, thanks for coming into the store, right? Hey, Sarah, thanks for coming into the store. What can I do for you? You know, and then you just generate general conversations like what movies are they watching, right? What pop culture references, you know, what music are they listening to, right? And then you can get an idea of like, okay, I have X budget to spend. What events associate ourselves with our top 20% of purchasers in the specific area that we're looking for? And then that will give you the highest probability chance that that brand will be associated, or your brand will be associated with the things that they like. And then the things that they like will then make them want to purchase from you. So I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense. And that's actually something that I think we haven't done too much of formally, is talking to our customers after the fact about things that's not related to kind of cannabis and buying cannabis. So that's really interesting to kind of think about how do we get them to engage and just tell us things about themselves, just their life, where they live, where they exist, what do they do, that can help us benefit from creating a stronger kind of bond with them.
Yeah, because like that's exactly it, right? It's like, why do all these massive fashion brands just get celebrities to come in? They're not like, buy my jewelry, buy my jewelry, buy my jewelry. It's like, oh, holy crap, you know, Zendaya is doing this jewelry thing, so I want to be like Zendaya. It's not, I want to wear diamond jewelry. It's, I want to be like her, right? So that's more so brand. It's an association with what people think are already cool. And you can do it the hard way and build your own brand yourself, right? But, you know, Nike sponsors, you know, is working with LeBron, and I buy my shoes because I want to be like LeBron, not because I want to wear basketball shoes. You know what I mean?